Welcome to the World of Warcraft Raids, Gameplay, Questing, and More panel. Your panelists are Craig Amai, Tom Chilton, Ian Hazakostas, Dave Kosak, Corey Stockton, and Greg Street.
All right. Hello, guys. Just jumping right into things. So this panel, we're going to kind of pick up a bit where we left off at our intro panel yesterday. Go over some raids info, questing info, gameplay, and other systems that we didn't get to talk about yesterday, and then we'll have some time for question and answer right after that. So let me just jump right into this. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the raid content that we're going to have in Warlords of Draenor. So yesterday I mentioned the Blackrock Foundry raid. This is going to be the capstone of the raid content that we launched the expansion with. As I mentioned, we're going to try to repeat the two-tier system that we had in Mists of Pandaria, where we have that sort of smaller intro tier that's available right away to kind of whet your appetite for raiding, as most of the world is still leveling and gearing up and getting ready for that. And then a few weeks after that, we unlock, sort of the real centerpiece of the intro expansion content. And that's going to be the Blackrock Foundry. Now, this is the center of the Iron Horde war machinery in the zone of Gorgrond. It's going to be a 10-boss raid and non-linear layout. We have heard you guys, we miss Ulduar 2, we miss Icecrown Citadel, that type of layout. There's a lot to be said for delivering both an epic raid.
So does one other guy.
Exactly. Just that one guy, though. There's a lot to be said for delivering an epic raid in terms of scope, but also giving you the freedom to kind of work your way through a place more organically instead of just proceeding from boss 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's also nice to be able to choose what you're going to progress on and so forth. So we're happy to do that. And your goal here is going to be to dismantle the Blackrock Foundry from the inside, tear down the war-making capabilities of the Iron Horde, and face off against Warlord Blackhand, who is the chieftain of the Blackrock Orcs and heads up the Foundry as a whole. Now, this is a concept illustrating just kind of the general vibe we're going for here. Really just a lot of, this is smoke and soot and flame and dark iron. That's what the Iron Horde's all about. That's what their machinery is all about. Now, this is a sort of overall layout in 2D of what we're looking at for the structure of the raid as a whole. And you see there are 3 wings here. There is sort of the first wing, which is mostly about melting down the ore into slag. Second wing, where that molten ore is forged and refined and shaped into weapons, armor, the engines of war. And then finally an assembly wing, where all of that is put together, soldiers are armored up, the war machines are shipped off to the front lines. Now, we want to put this together really as something that has a very functional feel to it. This isn't, a place that was designed as a raid zone, this is a place that was designed as a foundry. And we want to get back to some of that interconnectedness that you got as you walk through old places like Upper Blackrock Spire or Blackrock Depths, where you can kind of look down and see the other parts of the zone going on around you. So just because you see this 2D layout where everything is spread out in different directions, that's really more just to kind of help us in our conceptualization of the zone. But the thought is 3 separate wings, and then once you've cleared all of these wings, you can access the crucible that you see at the top of this layout, where Blackhand himself awaits. Now, part of what we'd like to do in having nonlinear layouts is also really preserve some of the freedom that players currently doing flexible mode may be used to in how they approach the zone. Right? If you're doing Siege of Orgrimmar today, at this point, if you want to just queue up and face off against Garrosh directly, you can do that if you're doing flexible. Now, with our new raid structure, it's going to be something that you just zone in the front door for instead of queuing, but we want to preserve some of that freedom. So we envision some things such as maybe once you've cleared all the wings a certain number of times, maybe you can forge a key that lets you directly access the Crucible later on, if your raid leader has that ability, so that you don't necessarily have to feel like if you have to re-clear 9 bosses just to get to the 10th every time. And in general, you have as much freedom and be able to plan your raid week the way you want. Speaking of the new raid structure, I'd like to revisit this slide from yesterday's panel. I know there were a lot of questions, and I've definitely heard a lot of interesting discussion coming out of this. I just wanted to clarify how this is going to work overall. So in Warlords, we're going to have ultimately 3 different difficulty tiers for organized raid content. Raid Finder, more or less unchanged. The Raid Finder of Warlords is going to be the Raid Finder you know today, with some addition of flexible scaling tech to help a bit with queue times, to help with minimizing waiting time if people leave midway. But other than that, we see the normal mode in Warlords really being equivalent to what flexible mode is today in difficulty and in overall, in our overall philosophy towards it. It just doesn't make sense to call a difficulty flexible once flexible really is the norm and how the majority of our raiding is going to work in Warlords. If you are a normal mode guild today, you will find heroic content likely suitable for you in Warlords, except that will now scale from 10 to 25 flexibly. And if you're a heroic guild today, our 20-player mythic content will be for you. Now, about the raid structure, one of the awesome things about this, and one of the things that makes flexible raiding as a style great, is the freedom that it gives you to raid with friends that maybe can't necessarily make all of your raids, people that may log on late for the raid one night, they can hop in, and you can also participate without necessarily feeling a sense of obligation where you're letting 3 people down if something comes up and you can't make it. But what this also means is that all of our raiding, except for Mythic, will be fully cross-server enabled from day 1. That is normal, that is heroic. So when Highmall or when the Blackrock Foundry opens up, if you have, you want to join some real-life friends on another server for their normal mode raid on the weekend after you do heroic with your guild, you can do that, or vice versa. We really want to give the maximum amount of flexibility to be able to play with your friends and experience the content as you choose. I think cross-server Mythic would be a bit messy with things like Realm Firsts, and for the most part, Mythic guilds are grounded to a single server, so we're keeping it that way. Each difficulty has a separate lockout. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I did heroic with my guild on Wednesday, so I can't join my friend's raid on the weekend. It also means there's no more dynamic difficulty switching, because everything is its own lockout, which has some other interesting implications. Right now, you have the UI interaction very frequently, if you're a normal or heroic raider, where you say, let's switch the difficulty to heroic for this boss, then back to normal. Well, when you're doing Mythic raiding, for example, you're just doing it as a standalone raid. It means we can also have Mythic Trash. I know everyone really has wanted Mythic Trash if you've been dying for it for years. Okay, maybe not. But you can get Mythic Trash loot, which is something.
Gastropods.
Just wait for the Mythic Gastropod. Moves like 10 times faster. Now, the way these lockouts are going to work also is that they're very similar to the current flexible lockouts in that they're loot-based lockouts. That is to say that you can be in the raid with a boss alive that you've already looted that week. However, you just can't loot it again. So again, if you want to help out a friend, if someone asks you to join them later on, you're not going to be able to loot the same boss twice, because that would be all kinds of problematic, but you're completely free to raid and join groups as you see fit. Currently, the way flexible raids work, you go through the interface and you queue up for it, you're teleported into the zone. That's a concession ultimately that we made to just get the raid finder functionality, to get flexible raid functionality into the game and in your hands for Siege of Orgrimmar, which we think is very well worth it and awesome. But in the long run, since this is normal raiding going forward, this isn't some special mode, this is just how raiding works. You walk in the front door, you form a group, you zone into the instance, and you are raiding, except it scales flexibly. The only raid activity that's going to work through queuing through the UI and teleporting is going to be Raid Finder. So, how does loot work, many people have asked? Does this mean that personal loot is now the norm for heroic raiding? No. Again, personal loot as it currently stands is really well suited to groups of strangers in Raid Finder, or pickup groups where maybe it lets you not have to deal with, do you trust someone to be the master looter? Do I trust this guy's not going to ninja loot and run off with things? But when you're playing with your guildmates, when you're playing with your friends, you want the ability to trade items to those who need them more than you. If someone comes back to the game after a while, maybe you want to kind of train them through and dump a bunch of loot in their lap so that they can really get caught up quickly. Maybe you want to pass something to someone for their 4-piece set bonus. All those things need to be possible, we feel, and that's how loot is going to work in normal and heroic mode. So that raises the question, of course, well, how is the drop going to work? If I have 13 people, do I get 2.6 loots? What is 0.6 of a loot? The answer is actually 0.6 of a loot is 60% chance to get a third loot. So the thought is that this will scale smoothly where the ratio of loot drops per eligible player remains constant throughout. We really want to avoid and continue to work on avoiding any perception of breakpoints or magic numbers when it comes to making these flexible groups. That's something we've certainly learned and heard from the community as this has played out. We never want you to feel like when your friend asks to join, you say, oh no, that's going to put us over some invisible threshold. We also don't want you to feel like you need to go out and find some random warm body to get over some threshold. In addition to loot, one of the things that we're working on doing is streamlining the way some of our ability targeting and logic work, again, to avoid breakpoints. In many cases today, you have cutoffs where when you bring a 15th player, suddenly 3 people get targeted by some boss's ability instead of 2. Again, we feel like with most abilities, we can probably randomize in a way that avoids the existence of breakpoints. So for example, to use a Siege of Orgrimmar example, Sun Tenderheart in the Fallen Protectors encounter casts Shadowword Bane. Shadowword Bane hits two people if you have 10 players, 5 people if you have 25. Today, the second you go from 14 to 15, it starts hitting a third person, which makes many people, I think, somewhat justifiably feel, oh, we should try to avoid having 15. 14 is kind of a magic number. Well, if instead it just hit when you had 14 and had an 80% chance of hitting 3, 20% chance of hitting 2, over the course of the fight as a whole, you're still going to see the same number of debuffs on average, but you're never going to feel like you're hurting yourself by bringing an extra person. Now, there are some mechanics that won't necessarily work for, like prisons on Shaw of Pride, where it's actually really important to know exactly how many you're going to go out. You don't want to be caught by surprise or have to be random every time. But for the most part, we're going to do everything we can do to avoid the existence of breakpoints when it comes to mechanics, when it comes to loot, and to really make it feel like, okay, you have 17 people online, go raid with 17. You have 12 online, go raid with 12. Just play with your friends, have fun, enjoy the content. Now I'm going to hand it off to Craig, who's going to talk a bit about some of the quest revamps we have coming up.
Thank you, Ian. Hello, BlizzCon. All right, let's talk about quest. So one of the first things you're going to notice when you step into Draenor is that we're calling out key storylines through icons on our quest tracker and our quest log. Essentially, we want to draw attention to the big quest chains with big characters that lead towards big rewards, so you can make intelligent decisions about what content you want to participate in, what you want to focus on, especially as you reach that kind of end of the zone point where you're considering moving on. While those key storylines are guiding you through zones, you're going to be noticing that a lot of the other quests outside of those chains are more distinctly separated. So you really have the choice of whether you want to participate in additional quests along the way or whether you want to follow just that primary story track. This will have the side effect also of making the world feel a little bit more full and organic. If you go wandering out and find a quest hub, there won't be a magic quest that unlocks it and makes all the quests there start appearing. And it'll give you a lot more control over your experience. The efficient route will still be follow those key storylines, pick up the other quests along the way. But if you've been doing dungeons a fair bit, or again, if you're reaching the end of a zone, you may choose to focus on those key storylines and not be picking up as much of those strictly optional quests. As you go through these zones questing, you'll notice we'll be using a lot more of these side systems, dynamic events and treasures that we first introduced on Timeless Isle. So dynamic events are essentially gameplay challenges with cool rewards behind them and minimap callouts. So on Timeless Isle, for the most part, they were soloable rare spawns, but as you step into Draenor, you're going to be seeing some more complex versions, some multi-stage events with big culminations, or some wandering raid bosses that encourage lots of players to pile up and overcome a big social challenge. These will be mixed in a lot more during the level up experience. You'll also be seeing them a lot at level 100. So it should make the entire experience feel a little bit more, again, organic. Make it feel like there are opportunities coming up outside just the questing experience. Treasures are essentially our way of encouraging you to explore the world even more than the art already does. We make beautiful worlds, and we want to reward you for peeking in every nook and cranny. So the idea with treasures is when you find that hidden path that leads up the mountain and the quest never took you up, it's very likely there will be something at the top of it that makes it worthwhile to go up there. We also want to, with our treasures, kind of support just little mini stories within the world. So a couple examples you'll see in Frostfire. When you go into one of our ogre towers, you might run into a little bird's nest up on a rafter that just has a sparkling gem in it that you can loot for a cool reward. Or you might run into an Iron Horde caravan that's become entrenched in snow with some Iron Horde troops trying to dig out the wheels. And if you kill them, there's a chest on the back of their caravan that has a cool reward in it. You expect these to be very frequent because as we have that goal of encouraging exploration, we want to make sure that we're doing it effectively all over the world. Another thing you'll be seeing is what you might be used to from the reward scheme for quests is that you'll run into a lot of green items along the way and then cool blue items at the end of essentially key storyline chains. What you'll be running into now is that there's going to be a lot more opportunity for rewards to spike during your questing experience. So a reward that might be green for one player might actually end up being blue or epic for another player, become less predictable, a little more exciting as you're questing through. We also have a fair number of UI updates that are coming in with Draenor. I want to give you a sneak peek at a few of them. So here you'll notice the special icons next to some of the quests in the quest log. Those are the key storyline icons I was talking about. Above them, you'll also notice that we're calling out the number of key storylines that exist in a zone in the form of chapters here, 2 out of 6. This will help you actually have a rough gauge of your progress through a zone, so you can make choices about whether you want to finish that zone off versus moving on to another one, depending on how far you're through. The other thing you'll notice here is the quest banks on the map. Those are actually calling out the locations of key storylines that you haven't yet picked up, or that maybe you abandoned along the way. So these will actually dynamically update if you went halfway through a storyline and stopped. They'll show you where you can pick back up on that storyline if you want to. This should make it a lot easier to figure out exactly what you need to do to knock out those zone achievements, finish off a zone without, asking for help from CS or anything. Max level content. I want to talk about this a little bit while we're here too. So we had the philosophy going from Cataclysm into Mists of Pandaria that we wanted to provide you a lot more things to do when you reached max level. Well, that philosophy still stands moving into Draenor. We want to give you lots of options, a lot of opportunity for things outside of just dungeons and raiding, things that you can do in the outdoor world. So in Draenor, you'll be seeing more max level content than ever before, but I can promise you right now that little, if any, of it is going to be daily quests. So there's a couple key content structure philosophies we locked in on Mists of Pandaria that we really liked. One of them was the progressive long-term storylines behind the Dominance Offensive and Operation Shield Wall dailies. The chapter-based kind of like leave you off on a cliffhanger, pick it up again in a few days or a week type content to take you through a big story over a longer duration. The other content structure we really liked the success of was the more open-ended structure inherent with Timeless Isle, with the exploration, the deep reward systems, options for how you want to participate in your content. We essentially want to marry those two structures and create big zones with lots of opportunity, free-form content that have these long-term progressive storylines that thread through them over the weeks, so you keep having reason to go back and dive into them even deeper. The one other type of max level content you might be seeing a bit more of in Draenor is essentially environmental gameplay in the form of, I guess you would have seen it in our Troves of the Thunder King loot room scenario. What we want to push forward is opportunities to use all those class abilities in the outdoor world that sometimes only apply to PvP or top-end raiding. Opportunities to play out your race and your class to its unique advantages to try and squeeze out extra rewards. So you'll be seeing a little bit more of that at max level too. So that's a good overview of our max level content. Next up, we're going to talk about garrisons. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Corey.
Just going to jump in and reiterate some of the points. Our overall goal with our questing system is we wanted to create a more dynamic world, a more organic experience this time, and really kind of break you out of your patterns that you have while you're questing so that you see more happening around you. And particularly at max level, we experimented a lot in Pandaria, and some of those experiments we think worked out really great. Some of them were the Golden Lotus, but we tried a lot of things. And I think you'll see some of those more successful experiments roll up into the next expansion because we really want to have a lot to do out in the world while you're exploring this great world of Draenor.
Right on. So now we're going to get into some garrisons. Anyone that was here yesterday for our talk, we kind of did an overview of the system, and today we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into how some of this stuff works. So when you build your garrison, you get a certain number of buildings that are already there to begin with. These are things that we didn't think they didn't really fit the paradigm of taking this structure and getting to place it anywhere in the garrison, like a mine, for example. A mine kind of has to be placed in a specific spot. The town hall is your main building. That's the building you're going to go to interact with the guys that are running your garrison and send your guys on missions. So that's got a predefined spot, and it upgrades with your garrison as it goes. After you have starting buildings, you'll get the chance to build your first small building. Here's a list of all the small buildings that you can build. All of our profession buildings are considered in the small category. And this really fits the kit of what we were talking about yesterday, where you'll be able to actually dabble into professions that your main character doesn't have. So for example, let's say you find a follower, and that follower is an engineer. You can now choose to build the engineering works building, assign that follower to that building, and then you can now run missions to get recipes for engineering and build engineering items, but you're actually not even an engineer. You're a blacksmith miner, for example. It's a really cool way to integrate it into the gameplay. So moving on, now we have medium buildings. This is kind of the next step up from smalls. It's a wide variety of buildings here. The inn, we talked a little bit about the inn yesterday. That's a place that you could find new followers. This will also be the place that you can get the pet stable, which is a building that's very unique to pet battles. You'll be able to come here. There'll be a trainer here you can fight. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do here that'll be just based around having that one unique building. Next up would be large buildings. These are the things that you would expect to see like in a Warcraft 3 base. Things like your barracks, right? Your armory, your mage tower. These are really these defining large buildings that are going to set the scale for your garrison. Each of these buildings has a bonus. And these buildings have some of the best bonuses because they're the largest ones that you can get. So things like the barracks will increase the amount of followers you can actually have at any one time. So you're going to want to have more because they're out getting that loot for you. So the more followers you can have out on missions, the better chance you have to get new loot. Now, how do the buildings work? As we talked about yesterday, they upgrade over time. So you start out with a building. Now, each building has its own unique upgrade. So that barracks that you built, it'll start out looking kind of doinky, kind of small. But over time, you can get cooler and cooler versions that'll make it look more badass, more awesome, and it'll increase the bonus. So here's a look at a screenshot from our mock-up UI of how this would work. You can see the tooltip there on the infirmary that right now it's level 1, but at level 2 it increases the bonus. Obviously you'll have to pay a cost to get that, but you'll do all of that through this UI. You'll be able to come to the building, choose to upgrade it, wait a little bit of time, and then you'll get that new bonus. Now, how do we get the upgrades? Some upgrades you're just going to be able to purchase just for gold or currency. But we really want to get this feature to be something that feels like a part of the world. So we're going to drop a new item called blueprints. And you'll be able to find blueprints all over the world, lots of different ways. They could be a faction reward, quest reward, a random drop in a zone. When you find it, you just right-click it, just like a recipe for a profession, and then you can go back to your garrison, and now you'll know how to build that upgrade for that building. Where are these plans? Anyone that's played the pet battle system will be familiar with this concept here. So on this infirmary, to get the level 3 blueprint, we tell you where it is in the world. We show you it's a drop, it's in Frostfire Ridge. We could do the same thing with faction or wherever it would go. So you don't need to hop out of the game and go somewhere to try to find that info. It's right here available to you. Now, yesterday we talked a little bit about this too, about specializations. This allows you to customize a building once it gets to rank 3. So buildings have a total of 3 upgrades, and when they hit that 3rd upgrade, you unlock the ability to specialize it. So here's a look at what that would look like in game. You can see this armory has 3 specializations. Currently, we're thinking we'll let you change the specialization probably once each day. We might put a cost on it to change the specialization. We don't want you swapping it all the time, but we definitely want to give you the option to change it without too much trouble. It's a really cool reward for getting rank 3 of a building. Not only do you get the new art, the better bonus, but you get this piece of customization that you can do to it. Some buildings will let you assign followers to them. The example I gave you guys about the engineer a little earlier, all the profession buildings can have a follower assigned, but you can also assign followers to other places, like the mine, for example. You could find a miner, assign him there, and then he could actually work offline while you're gone and collect ore for you. And then what you could do is you could come back into the garrison, go to that building, and collect that ore from him when you log back in. Here's a look at what that would look like. Here's a mine. You can see we've got an orc there working away, generating a specific amount of ore per hour. But it's not like this is free, right? Because that follower, he's working at this mine, but he could also be out running a mission for you, trying to get loot. And that's where a lot of the gameplay really comes into running your garrison. You're going to have to make decisions about, I have these followers, do I want to have them do things for me in the garrison, trying to learn profession recipes, gathering resources, or do I want to send them out on a mission and have them try to bring back, gear for me? You have to really make those choices. So the garrison itself upgrades as a whole. You have buildings that upgrade, but you're going to need a place to put all those buildings. So your garrison starts small, but as it grows, we'll give you more plots to put things in. So here's a look at how that UI would work. This garrison is currently at tier 2. It can go up to tier 3, and you'll get 3 more building slots, allowing you to get more bonuses, find more followers that you can assign to those buildings. It's really a system. It works like your character, right? Every time you level, you get an opportunity to do more things and do more stuff, and that's really the concept here. We want the garrison to grow with you. Now, how do you get it to actually change from one tier to the next? You have to fill all the plots. So let's say at rank 2, your garrison has 6 plots. Once you get a building in all 6 of those plots, you'll unlock the ability to upgrade the garrison as a whole and move it to the next tier. Those plots come in 3 sizes, and you just have to match up the building size with the plot size, and then you can place that building anywhere you want in that garrison, as long as the plots match up. So here's a look at the garrison map in-game. This is rank 1. So we've got 5 plots here for players to use. This is what you start with. Then you go into rank 2, and you can see we've added a few more plots here. A mage tower has been placed, an infirmary. And finally, here's rank 3. And everything's unlocked in this garrison. There's still a few empty spots for players to fill here, but you can really get the vibe of how big it grows with you. So you've got followers, you've got buildings. What do you do with them? You need to send them on missions. So let's talk a little bit about how that would work. Missions can be a number of different activities. Here's an example of a few, how it would work in game. You can send them on a quest. You can do a scenario. You could obviously run a dungeon, and even you can run raids. Raids we're thinking are going to take multiple days to run, but it's really that cool, epic feeling that these followers you find can do awesome, cool things. They're not just hanging out. You can send them out to actually fight for you. The difference between all these activities is they take a different number of followers. So a quest you can run with a single follower, whereas a dungeon, you would have to combine 5 followers together and send them off. So how do you assign them? Here's a look at that UI. So your followers are listed out here on the left. On the right, you've got a list of missions. In this case, they're dungeon missions. And you just drag followers into those slots. You can see those lists of icons down there on the right side. Those are basically traits for the mission. And what you want to do is try to match those traits up with the abilities on your follower to get a bonus. So let's say there's a mission where you've got to kill orcs. There's an ability on followers called Orcbane. You want to try to match those 2 together, and then you'll get a bonus on that mission, and you'll do better at it. So next up, you select the mission here. We show you the difficulty of the mission. So as you're dragging the followers into the UI, it's going to dynamically change and try to give you a little bit of help and know this is something you can do probably pretty easily. This mission, you might have a chance to fail at it, so you really want to decide, do I want to send those guys on it or not? And of course, when you're done, you send them off and wait for them to bring back your sweet loot. So that's a little bit of some more details on how garrisons will work. I'm going to hand it off to Greg, and he's going to talk to you about some of the system stuff coming up.
I was going to elaborate a little bit, because one of the things that I think is important to call out is that even though you're using that UI to assign your follower that has mining into the mine is an actual physical place in your garrison. So when you go there and you go inside the mine, you'll actually see your follower hard at work. Maybe you can whip him a little bit or whatever it is you want to do. If he's a lazy peon, but maybe Steve or something like that. So you can go in there and you'll even be able to get some mining nodes yourself, and even that mine upgrades over time. So the mine is able to get bigger so you're able to get access to more nodes, stuff like that.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about social philosophy. I hinted at this yesterday, but ultimately, we want World of Warcraft to be a game that you play with your friends. We think you guys will have more fun. We think you'll build connections. You ultimately probably stick with the game longer. So what we're really going to try to do in Warlords is to encourage you to play with the friends you already have. We're trying to remove the barriers that stop that from happening. And we'd also like you to encourage you to make new friends. There was once upon a time, before we offered so much random matchmaking, where you would, hey, this guy's a really good tank. Maybe next time I run a dungeon, I want to find this guy. Nowadays, we can provide a tank, sometimes it takes a little longer than others, but we'll probably get you a tank at the end of the day, and there's less motivation to play with your friends. I like this anecdote with the guys in my office. One day I turned around, and one of the dudes was running a dungeon. I'm like, man, if he had asked me, I would have run it with him, but it was so easy just to jump into the dungeon himself that, maybe I wanted to get a cup of coffee or something first, and it was easier just to random matchmake than to play with a guy sitting right next to him. So the random matchmaking isn't going anywhere. We're still going to have Dungeon Finder, we're still going to have Raid Finder, but we kind of want that to feel like a last resort. That's what you do when your friends aren't online, or you're between friends, you start a new job, you got to find a different group. We're going to try to make Raid Finder feel a little more like tourist mode. You're there to see the content and experience the bosses and get to tell part of the story, but we're going to try to encourage people to also experiment with what normal and heroic feel like. So how are we going to support all of this enhanced socialness? We've talked a lot about flexible rating. Something else we're going to do is finally add a pretty good group finder. We have a raid browser in the game today, and it's pretty terrible, and you guys probably forgot it was there. You can still access it. It's kind of a trick to find it. But we think this feature can be a lot bigger, a lot cooler, compete with the random matchmaking stuff that's already out there. There are some mods and add-ons that people have developed to do this already, and there's a ton of demand from you guys, so we're going to do it. It's going to be very browser-based. You can make a group to do anything. If you want to go back and work on your Shadowmourne, you want to go make a group to kill world bosses, you want to make a rated battleground team, you can do all of that here. It's all cross-realm. You can browse through, find a group of people that look like you want to hang out with, and get a group together. Stacking the deck is a new type of buff that you'll see in Dungeon Finder. Currently, we have the luck of the draw, where we give you rewards to encourage you to play with people in the random queue. Believe it or not, at the time, we were worried that people wouldn't use Dungeon Finder, so you had to give you a little bit of extra incentive there, and that worked out really, really well. So the way stacking the deck will work is it will give you a different type of bonus, in this case, bonus Valor. Imagine you get 10% bonus Valor for every friend that you queue with. And then that last bullet is indicating that if you do use Dungeon Finder for a random group, and you get to the end, you're like, hey, this worked out pretty well, do you guys want to re-queue? That will then count as a pre-made group, and you will also get the stacking the deck bonus. All right, let's talk about leveling. 10 levels are back. And we really want leveling to feel exciting. We made the change to the talent tree in Mist for a lot of good reasons, and we're really happy with that change overall. But it's a totally fair criticism that getting a new level doesn't feel as exciting as it did in the old day. Even getting plus 1% crit, as lame as that was better than getting nothing. But we want to stop handing out so many new abilities. We don't think it's going to be a great experience if you get 10 new buttons to stick on your bars as you level up from 90 to 100. This has been kind of a long time coming. It's amazing to kind of see the turnaround in the community that now everyone's like, you know what, I'm good. I don't need any more abilities. Stop giving me new abilities. So what we're going to try is from level 91 to 100, as you level up, you'll get some type of upgrade to one of your core spells. Some of these will introduce class changes that we already were planning on making to kind of make it feel like a bonus as you level up. But to be totally fair, some of them are just going to be passive bonuses. Think of them kind of like the old school spell ranks, except you won't have to visit your trainer or anything like that. You always gain a little bit of power just from gaining a level, but we're going to put a really big boost behind some of your spells so you can really feel it. Like if you suddenly had 20% bonus damage to execute, that's something you're going to feel the next time you go kill someone. But don't expect a ton of class changes overall. Like I said, a lot of these are going to be passive bonuses, not change for change's sake, just to give you a level 93 reward. These are some sample leveling rewards. Hopefully they'll stick, but it's the kind of ideas that you can see that we're playing with. Okay, let's talk a little about items. So our philosophy with itemization, this is like the best reward we can give out in the game, and it's really disappointing when the best reward we can give out in the game feels a little lame. We really want getting a new item to feel exciting. We think part of the problem here is all the modification you have to do when you get an item. It's really disappointing. You get a new helmet, and you're like, oh man, not gonna get a meta gem. Maybe I'll just keep it in my bag for a while, and maybe I'll get something better. That's awful. It's time to stop the madness. Hidden expertise. One of our core design values is to make something feel like a bonus. And we think we're at the point where hidden expertise don't feel like a bonus. You have to get to these magic numbers before you feel like you're really fully functional as your spec. Similar, dodge and parry are cool mechanics. Like, it totally makes sense that you're super nimble dude and you dodge out of the way of the dragon claw. But it just hasn't worked out really well as dodge and parry rating that you stack on gear. And we know, particularly lately, tanks are kind of bummed when they get avoidance on their gear. And remember, I'm going to talk a little bit about items here, but yesterday we talked about how we're going to clean up your bag space. I don't want anyone to freak out at all the different types of items we're going to drop, so hopefully you'll have a little more room to deal with it. So I think I have to credit Travis Day with the initial gone slide, but here we go. Now, again, your warrior will still be able to dodge. Maybe we can have more interesting mechanics, like following a successful whatever, you have a higher chance to parry the next attack, but you won't see it on gear. We will have tanking stats, and I can talk about that in a sec here. Oh, reforging. This is what we call an idea that sounded good on paper. But what it turned into is this terrible cascade where you get a new piece of gear and now you have to reforge all of your old gear to hit some cap. And yeah, it'll be a little better without hidden expertise, but things like haste caps and crit caps are still out there. And overall, we think it just drags down the excitement of getting a new item when you know you're nowhere near being able to put it on yet. And there's more.
I like how we could get that kind of cheer when we introduced reforging and the same cheer when we get rid of it. It's awesome.
Then 7.0 will bring it back.
It's reverse psychology.
We'll get rid of it. Enchants are one of those other things. We really want enchants to feel like a bonus. Back in the day, you would get your avalanche, your crusader, whatever on your weapon. That was a really big deal. Since then, we've kind of gone overboard, as we tend to do. And you're putting enchants on your bracers and stuff like that. What we really want to do is have a system where fewer items overall can be enchanted, but there's more choices for those individual items. So maybe we'll make multiple weapon enchants, and you pick the one that's good for your spec or your playstyle. I feel like I'm beating down on some of the professions a little bit here. Don't worry, we'll try to figure out to make sure to minimize the economic impacts to enchanters out there. But we don't think it's fair to everyone to have to deal with so many enchants just so you can have a little bit of gold in the bank. We're going to do something similar with gems. Very few items are going to have gem sockets, but when they do, they're going to be a really big deal. They'll be something exciting. You might only have a gem on a couple of your tier pieces, for example, but it'll be a pretty big stat bonus. I don't think we'll do any like multiple socketed items, so there's no reason to have set bonuses again. And likewise, we think meta gems aren't really a decision. You just get the one that's right for you as a healer or a DPS, and that decision's over. But if you think of the way like Warforging works today, where there's a random chance that your item could be a little better, there's a random chance that it might have a gem on it. So you might get a weapon, and then a few days later, you get a weapon with a gem socket on it, and now you have the decision of, is this an upgrade you want to use? Do you want to pass to one of your buddies in the group, and so on? Whoa. Nobody's happy but the paladin when the int plate drops. So going forward, we're just going to have plate. If plate drops and you're a plate using class, it's potentially something you can wear. Same thing is true of mail, leather, and cloth. So the way this will work is this is awesome. I get all the good slides. If you're a Ret Paladin, like most of you are, the plate will have strength on it. If you change to your holy spec, the strength on the plate will change to int, and you can just wear that.
Most popular change ever made.
So even in like PvP, for example, they'll just be the priest set from now on. You don't have to, decide you want the healer one or the DPS one. So I'm talking strictly about armor here. So, helmet, shoulders, legs, all of those very visible pieces. We still want jewelry, cloaks, trinkets, and weapons to be more role-focused. If you talk to healers, many of them will tell you that spirit is actually a pretty interesting stat, and you can decide how much spirit you want on your gear in a way that, say, the mage can't decide how much hit they want on their gear. So jewelry, cloak, trinkets, weapons can still be more role-focused. You might have items with spirit, in which case the healer would be interested. You might have an item without spirit, in which case other people might be interested, or the healer might be as well. Some of these will be less spec agnostic, so they'll be more spec agnostic, so they may just have attack power, spell power, rather than being like the agility spirit item. And then to replace the loss of dodge and parry, we think we're back at a place where we can just put armor as a good tanking stat. Active mitigation has worked out really well, and we think there's room just to have armor. It won't be the stat on every piece because it's not going to be on all of your actual armor, but it can be on things like the rings and cloaks. Tertiary stats. So it might seem like we're really streamlining gear here, but what we're really trying to do is give it a long tail. It's not fun when you go for a long time and don't get your weapon and feel like you're just really far behind everyone else. But at the same time, we don't want you to gear up, in 2 weeks and be done, and then say like, dude, when's the next raid coming out? So we're kind of expanding the idea of Warforging. I mentioned we're doing it with gems. We're also adding these bonus tertiary stats. So you may get a glove one day that has an extra stat on it that does something cool. These don't count against the budget. It's just a bonus when it happens. And here's some examples of tertiary stats we're playing with. I'm not going to read all these. You guys can see the slides. Now again, it's really unlikely, unless you're very dedicated or very lucky, that you're going to have your sturdiness set, because there's just not going to be that many pieces out there. You're not going to be able to stack sturdiness, and guess what? You can't reforge it. We added a little bit about will stack down there because we realize our movement bonuses are kind of difficult to understand about what works with what. So we've rebuilt the system to where pretty much any movement speed you get will work with any other movement speed up to some, sane level. Druids. Cleave's been an interesting stat. We played with it a little bit on the trinkets in the latest raid tier, and we don't think it's necessarily fun to be like, I'm going to put on my cleave set, I'm going to take off my cleave set. But if you get it as a bonus on some of your items, hey, that could be pretty cool. You'll do a little bit of extra AE cleaving sometimes. Item squish. We tried it before, we're trying it again. Why? I'm a pretty simple guy at the end of the day, and I have trouble understanding when I see that many zeros on the screen. Make whatever jokes you want. Most of our item inflation comes from previous raid tiers. But it's much less important that Blackwing Lair gear is a massive upgrade over Molten Core gear. Yeah, people are still running that old content, and we're cool with that, but it's not that big a deal that the Blackwing Lair gear is much higher item level anymore. So we're just going to flatten out all of the big jumps that come at the previous raid tiers at these levels. This is current insanity. And these are some slightly more sane numbers. Okay, a bunch of caveats here. I hear people cheering, but I know there's people out there grumbling too, dumbing the game down. Your relative power will not change. If you look at percentages, if you are a healer and you know how much your flash heal heals on your tank, the bar will still jump by the same amount. The relative power of 5.4 gear will not change. So if you're currently a heroic raider, your gear will be just as powerful as it is today relative to all the other gear, and that'll still translate into going into 6.0. If it takes you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog, it will still take you 5 seconds to kill a Timeless Isle Gulp Frog. And I should probably say this one 4 or 5 times, but if you like to solo old content, you can still solo old content. We'll make sure that happens. We knew a lot of people were trying to get their Ashes of Alar, trying to get their hammer from Ragnaros, but it turns out a lot of people do this all the time, and it brings a lot of extra value to the game for players who want to keep supporting it. And if you've played on the floor, the item squish is already in, and if you didn't even notice it was in, then awesome. That wraps up our presentation. Looks like we have about 10 minutes left, so we would love to entertain some questions. Be nice to stick to the Warlords of Draenor topics for now, though we are doing a second Q&A later on today that's pretty much open-ended.
We also appear to have a giant dance floor here in case you guys want to dance while you ask the question.
Mosh pit.
Hi. I know you said that the mythic tier of rating will stay outside of the cross realm. I come from a very small server, and we don't have any 25-man teams, and most of our guilds are also very small. We may have the issues coming up with a 20-man team. Do you have any way to address switching from a 10 and 25-man option to exclusively having a 20-man option?
So that's completely a valid concern. On smaller servers, the connected realms that we're unrolling and continuing to roll out are going to help a lot with that in terms of making sure that you have a certain critical mass on any given server, that it feels like you have a lot of active guilds to deal with recruitment and for people to find a home to raid. But that said, we recognize that this transition is not necessarily going to be an easy one, particularly for the current 10-player heroic guilds. One thing that is worth noting is that the introduction of a flexible heroic mode does at least mean that as you're trying to grow upward, you actually can continue to raid as you strive to reach that 20-player mark. Previously, it was impossible to grow from, let's say, 10 to 25, because what does a 16-player raid group look like today in Mists of Pandaria? It looks like a lot of people sitting on the bench being angry. Whereas you can do 16-player, 17-player heroic, then when you get to 20, now you can begin to do mythic. We wanted to get this information out there ahead of time so that people can start planning. And the reality is, when we release a new expansion with new content, you are going to be progressing upwards through those tiers of difficulty. There will be a lot of people returning to the game looking for homes. And our hope is that while we know it's going to be a difficult transition for many to make, in the long run, we'll be able to offer a much more streamlined experience, a much more competitive experience for the higher-end heroic raiders, and a better tuned experience all around.
Hey guys, my question is more around the player experience with questing and garrisons. So how will you manage the suspension of disbelief that happens when, for example, you have a phased-in garrison or a random event that just happens over and over and over again when you want to create a living and breathing world in Draenor? Like all the things that if you just wait a little bit or camp a little bit, you will be able to do. How will you manage those rewards for players?
Maybe you can clarify a little bit. I'm not sure what the garrison and phasing has to do with camping things.
So, for example, if you have a garrison, I'm assuming that is per player and phased for that player. So
right, like the farm.
Yeah, so particularly in that, it has to do with the living and breathing world, because I don't see what the purpose of having a garrison is if you will not have any real consequences for it. For example, why would you have a fortress if it cannot be attacked by other players, for example?
Okay. So I could see, interactions with other players being something that we do as we continue to develop the feature, maybe in the long run. I think, building a base for the sake of building a base is actually really cool. I think players will have a lot of fun, deciding where to put their buildings and what buildings they want to use. I don't think it necessarily requires that it be attacked by other players for it to be cool. Also, as far as its, kind of phased location in the world, you got to bear in mind that 99% of the world is still not phased, right? And it's still all the kind of public adventuring area that you normally experience. So I don't think you'll be running into a problem where you're coming in and out of phases constantly because of garrisons. There are very predefined locations in several different zones where you can build them, but those are, relatively small compared to the zone itself.
It's also worth noting that we have some new tech that will help us better integrate the garrison into the world outside. Whereas with your player farm in Half Hill today, you only kind of see your own personal plots and farm phase in as you kind of walk up to the farm. Our plan is that if you have a mage tower in your garrison and you're 1,000 yards away across the zone, you'll still see the silhouette of your own tower long before you get there.
Hi, I'm Richard Boone, guild leader for Wild the Musical on Chandris. Now, you were saying that you would like to get more friends working together to do the content on this. Where was any love for the guilds? That's our biggest thing for getting friends together. Are you going to bring back, have group will travel?
Well, when we say friends, we mean that interchangeably with guildmates, right? So if you are going on one of these dungeon runs with your guildmates, that's kind of what all we mean is that you've pre-grouped with somebody before you enter the instance. So if you group up with your guildmates and go into the dungeon, you'll get that stacking the deck bonus, for example.
Okay, 2 expansions ago, you gave us a bunch of guild perks. Last expansion, and so far this expansion, we see nothing.
Yeah, it's one of those systems where we feel like, it accomplished what we wanted it to accomplish for Cataclysm. but it isn't the kind of thing where we feel like we really get a whole lot out of it by continuing to pile on more levels and more perks. If we had some awesome ideas for what perks we wanted to do that just felt like, oh my god, we have to do this, then it would make sense for us to add some levels. But we don't want to be in the reverse situation where we're just increasing the level just to increase the level and then having to contrive perks to fill it out.
Flex rating should also help guilds in a lot of ways. We think flexible gives you a lot of, flexibility building groups and keeping a guild together and having different sizes of guilds work with the content. So flex is a really good feature for guilds, I think.
Hey, I'm Suzushiro from Big Crits. My question was on flexible raid sizes. Because right now, flexible caps at like 25 people, which makes sense because every other raid side caps at 25 people. But in Warlords, flexible is the normal one and is the norm. And Mythic is this weird mode that requires a specific number of people. So in that context, flexible cap, I mean, no other normal raid nodes capping at 25. That feels like something weird, arbitrary number. I mean, why not make it 30? Why not make it 40? I mean, a lot of people, ever since you removed them, a lot of people were asking for 40-man raids back. I thought they were crazy, but why not give it back to them?
I think that's definitely an interesting suggestion. There is some upper limit at which we lose confidence in our ability to make the fight mechanics scale truly seamlessly, as well as there are obviously issues that people have seen with input lag. The more people are involved, a lot of it scales exponentially in relation to the number of players present. But something like 30 is certainly a possibility, since there are social groups that are around that size today. It's not something that we have planned in stone right now, but it's something we certainly could explore.
My question is directed at Mr. Hazakostas. Hazakostas? That's it.
Yeah, close enough.
What's the status
Has a question.
What's the status on character scaling for old 5-mans and raids?
So the feature that was very briefly accessible, you're saying, in the recent 5.4 patch? I think so. That's something that we're exploring. I think the question is really how to do it correctly. We have the ability, as we've seen, in challenge modes and proving grounds, to scale item level down. We've also been exploring how to scale player level down functionally such that you keep your abilities, but maybe that their potency changes. It's something that we're still working on, continuing to work on, and once we have a way that we're happy with in terms of fully integrating it into the game as part of a reward structure, it's something that we'll have more to talk about in the future. But we're definitely interested in finding a way to explore and let people revisit the old content in a way that feels relevant, since there are so many dungeons out there and old raids that people probably never saw at the intended level.
So my question is about the garrison followers. When you send your followers out into the world to do a quest, do a dungeon, are they actually completing that content for you so the player doesn't have to do it, or is it garrison specific?
It's actually going to be garrison specific content. It wouldn't be something where like the follower is taking anything away from you. We're going to craft all of that content uniquely, specifically just for the garrisons.
Hello, I am WatchTech, former top druid in Goon Squad Mal'Ganis, and yeah, Mal'Ganis! So last expansion, we decided we didn't like the hassle of 25-man raids, so we went to 10. And now we do heroics, and it seems like you're taking our content away, so what are we supposed to do?
Again, understandable question, understandable position to be in. That said, Goon Squad certainly in particular is a fairly large community with, I would imagine, a number of interested heroic raiders to draw upon who may be returning for Warlords. I think that ultimately there is a population of people out there who are looking to do this cutting-edge, difficult content. And there will be some rearranging involved, inevitably, as happened when we went from 40 to 25. But really, we're making this as as sort of a change with an eye towards the long-term health of the game, towards the long-term health of high-end rating, and that we'll be able to deliver a better experience when we can focus the design and the tuning and the content creation on a single player size. For example, right now, there are many times where we have some cool mechanic that we would like to do, but we realize it's not going to scale down to 10 players at the high end very well, so we have to leave it on the cutting floor. Going forward, we think we'll be able to deliver a higher level of content, even though we do understand that in the short term, it does put people in a difficult situation.
It looks like we're out of time, so thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks, guys.
BlizzCon.
You're watching BlizzCon 2013, an original DirecTV production since 2008. Level up to DirecTV at directv.com.
BlizzCon 2013 continues live here on DirecTV and the virtual ticket. The fans are all across the Anaheim Convention Center playing the latest Blizzard games and hearing the latest information on what Blizzard has coming out in the future. We had a live raid for World of Warcraft this morning and so much more, including the championships for StarCraft 2, WCS. That'll be happening later today. And in just 1/2 hour, it's the Warcraft movie panel. The first details on the Warcraft movie with director Duncan Jones, Chris Metzen, and Rob Pardo from Blizzard. That is coming up in just a half hour, a highly anticipated part of today, Cat Hunter, because we're going to get some real news, we think, right?
We're going to have real news today, I guarantee you.
All right, so it didn't happen in the opening ceremonies. It's happening in a half hour, so stick around for that. But right now, we're going to get into some of the other Blizzard games. It's been very Warcraft heavy so far today, but now we're joined by Jason from the Hearthstone team to talk about this game. Kat was saying earlier, there's a great tournament going on, or there was a great tournament going on for the game today.
Invitational. This is the first time we're pulling in a lot of the streamers for the game, and they're actually going to be competing over the course of the time here we have at BlizzCon. We have the finals coming up here in a very short period of time.
Have you had a chance to watch any of the matches, or have you been too busy?
I have. I saw actually an earlier match between Trump and Reckle. It was an awesome match.
Yeah, it was
some really good play going on.
So what do you, just taking a step back for a second, what does it feel like to see all of this reception at BlizzCon for Hearthstone? The room was completely full when I was watching the stream earlier.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible. I mean we've been a team working at Blizzard for a while now, just on this game. It's a very small team, and actually coming here and giving a chance for all the fans to get to play it and actually see the response has been just overwhelming and awesome in every possible way.
Now, when you say small team, define that, because I want to put that in perspective. A typical dev team at Blizzard is about 120 people.
Yeah, I mean, they get to larger sizes for sure. In the case of Hearthstone, we have basically 15 core developers who've been working on the game now for a few years.
Yeah.
It's grown just a little bit recently, but it's definitely sort of a different approach to development and one that we think we're pretty excited about.
It's good. I know that one thing that they did talk about in the opening ceremony that everyone was very excited about was the different platforms. So we have Android, we have iPhone, and we have iPad. Now you're in internal testing on the iPad app, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
What are you learning from those tests?
You know, a lot of it is we want to make sure that when we bring Hearthstone to a new platform, it feels like an awesome Blizzard quality experience. And so one of the big things we're looking at is how do we make sure the controls feel great. When I'm actually dragging a card into play, when I'm flipping through my collection manager, that just feels like the most tactile, physical, awesome experience it possibly could. So a lot of it is how do we adapt the game to make sure that it feels like it's designed specifically for that platform.
So how many changes? I assume there's going to be a fairly large amount of design changes between iPhone and iPad, or not?
We're anticipating definitely have to come back and take a look at the UI to make sure it works really well for that platform. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why we waited until yesterday to make that announcement. You know, we really wanted to make sure that if we're going to go to iPhone where it's a smaller screen, same thing for Android, that it's going to hold up really well and it's going to feel just like a great, awesome experience. And so we've done some R&D internally. We feel like we can make it great, and so we're moving forward with it.
All right. So we are definitely going to come with your Twitter questions for Jason,
right.
So make sure you send them to Jeff Keighley and to myself. And before we go to Twitter questions, I want to wish Johanna in Sweden a happy birthday from the Twitter stream. That's for you.
Oh my God! All right, we're taking personal requests on the Twitter now, Kat. Please send them in to us.
The question on everyone's mind before we break into that is open beta. So
Sure.
just to confirm timelines for everyone in case they missed it, what are we looking at for have everyone inside the beta?
So the team is pushing really hard to try and get the game out this year. We feel pretty good about the progress we're making. You know, we don't want to move to open beta until we feel like everybody who wants to play Hearthstone can get in and have a great, stable, awesome experience. So our target is this year. There's a chance that slips into January, but we're seeing what we can do to hold on to that time frame.
All right, we got some questions for you on Hearthstone here. First one comes from Emerald Dream and wants to know any word on physical tie-ins with the game, i.e. gift cards redeemable in-game and things like that.
So nothing really specifically yet that we can talk to you on that right now. We do have, for example, the card that is awarded here through coming to BlizzCon or through the virtual ticket, where players can redeem it to get the Elite Tour and Chieftain card that we announced yesterday.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, I feel like that one turned out great. So we could imagine doing more things like that in the future as ways you could actually have physical cards that unlock additional minions in the game. But so far, that's the main one we're starting with.
Fantastic.
I know one of the requests that we've seen on podcasts have been like gift cards for 5 or 10 packs that you can buy, at Target and give to your friends and family. Is that type of business model being explored at all?
There is the ability right now to actually get Battle.net Balance as a gift card you can get and actually use that as a way to unlock additional content in Hearthstone. You have the ability to use your Battle.net Balance to buy card packs. So if you want to give someone a gift of more packs, that's one way you could do it.
That works.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we've got a lot of questions about World of Warcraft on Twitter, but if you guys have questions on Hearthstone, please send them to me at Jeff Keighley and at Cat Hunter, and we're going to ask Jason and the team here.
I have some bookmarked right here. I'll jump in. One thing here is that you've touched on, but how will future expansions potentially work? So is it like a physical TCG where you have blocks and expansions?
So we are going to have expansions where that'll bring in new cards and new ways to play. You'll have the chance to play with a range of different cards for each of the various classes. In addition to that, one of the really cool things we announced here yesterday is adventures.
Right.
And the way an adventure works is you'll be able to have a PvE experience going up against a really cool Warcraft boss, and by duking it out with that boss, I can earn additional cards that let me expand my card set. So both ways are ways we're going to be rolling out additional cards. The adventure coming first, and then expansions after that.
So tell me a little bit more about the adventure mode. What is the typical, how many adventures would be released? What is the replayability of it, and what is the time consumption for each adventure?
Sure. So we're still figuring out exactly how frequently they'll be coming out. What I can say is that we do want there to be a good challenge here for players where they can kind of go back in and potentially challenge the same boss multiple times to earn different cards. So they're not necessarily going to be cakewalks. They'll be challenging for players, which we think will be really fun. And then beyond that, we're looking for other things that would potentially release at the same time to come along with the adventures to potentially add additional features for the game as well.
Would there be any random feature to the deck of the boss or whoever it is that you're going up against?
Still don't know yet. We're still sort of working out the exact details of what you're going to be seeing when you see each of these bosses.
Okay.
But you can expect a good challenge there for sure.
All right. And Ben, when he talked about that, he iterated the fact that this would be, the cards that you would win from this would affect more of the metagame, whereas the expansions would introduce new game mechanics. What about new heroes? That's a big question on Twitter.
Right, yeah, we've definitely gotten that feedback over the course of the beta that, hey, that's awesome. Cool, I can play as Garrosh. Wish I could play as Varian, potentially.
Yeah.
So it's something we're thinking about. We don't have any specific time frame for when we're going to actually be rolling out additional heroes yet, but we're hearing the feedback and we're working on ways to create a little bit more variety there.
Okay.
All right, we got a lot of great questions coming in for you now on Twitter here. First one comes from Evoke. NZ says, how do we get the bonus card? I got my pet in WoW, but can't find the card. And also, this is a popular question I'm getting a lot. Will there be achievements in the game?
So going to the first answer first.
Yep.
You'll be able to get the card once you redeem the code through your Battle.net account. It's not going to show up until the next patch. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that when Hearthstone has its next patch coming out, really now within the next few weeks, we're not far off from that. That's when the card will be available for use in your decks.
Okay.
As far as the achievements question, that's another thing that we are excited about looking at for Hearthstone. It's definitely kind of a really kind of cool staple feature to a lot of our other games, and we think there's definitely a place for it in Hearthstone as well. Time frame for that is still to be determined, but you can see more of that coming up when we move into 2014.
Okay.
Seems like an easy place to put those achievements in would be the new leveling system that you guys introduced yesterday.
Yeah, exactly, in the ranked play. So for sure, having ways connecting achievements with ranked play, I think is an interesting idea.
Okay. More questions from Twitter. This one comes from AB Writing 101, Spencer. Spencer says, will players be able to sell cards to other players? The auction house comes to.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something where we put a lot of time into thinking about what's the right way to build out your collection in Hearthstone. And there's a lot of different ways that we could do that, and ultimately we settled on this crafting model, and we feel like that really works well for the goals of being a very accessible game, a game where I can go in and get access to those cards I want without having to worry about dealing with a secondary market or finding other players. It just felt like it was a better fit for us.
Fantastic.
One of the things that I was surprised about when this game came, released into open beta was that there isn't a lot of talk comparing it to the traditional TCG. There's much more talk comparing the game to Magic the Gathering. In the early phases of game design, because you've been with the team for a long time, were you a lot closer to the original WoW TCG and it took you a while to move away, or did you always start with this simplified version we're seeing today?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, Hearthstone was really designed to be an online game from the ground up. We really wanted to make sure that the game really felt like it had a lot of new features that could really only be realized in an online space. We are sharing some of the art with the WoW TCG, but beyond that, a lot of the core features and the things were really designed with this particular game in mind.
It was.
Fantastic. All right, we got more coming in, obviously, over Twitter here. A lot of people excited about the idea of it obviously being on iPad, and some people are asking about the release date. I think you guys have said it'll be sometime next year, right, for iPad?
Yeah, iPad is going to be following shortly after PC. We think we're making great progress on that one. We don't think we're too far off for that. As far as the other platforms, so looking at Android and iPhone, that's going to be following in the second half of the year.
And some people are asking, are you going to do betas for those mobile clients too, for iPad and Android?
Unfortunately, we don't have a good way to do that. That's actually one of the restrictions we're working with in terms of how Apple releases apps for their particular platform. So you can expect to see the beta continuing on for the PC until we're ready, and then we'll move straight to release when we get to the iPad.
Now here's a great question that came in from Twitter. Kat's got questions too, but this one comes from Zushiba. It says, will Hearthstone allow integration with WoW? I'd love to be able to challenge an NPC to a game, and if I win, I get a follower. Are you going to have any kind of links?
That's an awesome idea. It's something that we had some initial conversations with the WoW team here about, are there ways we can have games going back and forth between Hearthstone and WoW? I mean, right now you can see Hearthstone being played inside the taverns in WoW. And there's all kinds of other great ideas that we've got through the beta, so we'll definitely be exploring ideas like that.
What would actually be interesting is a Pet Battles expansion of Hearthstone. I can see a lot of the game mechanics working in, Pokemon, right? I mean, that's what it is. Right, I have a question here. Was it decided, this is maybe a little bit more design focused, but was it decided early on that 3 arena losses was easier to manage than, say, 5 during alpha testing?
It's a good question. I think we wanted to make it feel like you had a chance to kind of win and have a couple losses and really keep it fresh and exciting with your particular deck. We have actually been tuning the number of wins and losses, potentially at different points through the stage of Arena's evolution. So, and again, we announced yesterday that instead of just going up to 9 wins max, you can get up to 12 wins max.
Right.
So this isn't to say that we couldn't come back and potentially revisit that again in the future. We feel pretty good about three losses right now, so I think we're going to probably stick with that for a while.
Okay.
This one comes from Sarah. Sarah wants to know, what about a console version? Something like this, will we? You're talking about mobile. Will we see this on Xbox or PlayStation?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback there is basically whatever platforms you guys are excited about, whichever areas you'd love to play the game, we'd love to hear about. We heard a lot of response when we did the announcement about iPad that a lot of players love to play, or have Android devices, want to play there too, and that was honestly the biggest reason that we decided to focus on Android. So if there's a strong desire for console, we'd love to hear about that as well.
Has there been any direct feedback you've gotten from the Intel booth already on some of the touch versions?
I actually haven't had a chance to hear too much about it yet,
Yes.
but the conversation I have had is that it just feels great to be dragging cards around. It just feels like a great way to play Hearthstone. Always the tactile, physical experience was always important to us, and there's no real replacement to that except for dragging cards around yourself. So far the response has been good.
Yeah, I say definitely when the iPad version came into our home, that was all that was going on for a while.
All that happened at the Hunter household?
That's all that happened.
All right. Lots of other. I mean, there's some fun questions here. Obviously, will there be a way to get a Mike Morheim card? He would be the ultimate minion. I mean, I keep getting all these questions too. People asking about, is this going to expand to Diablo? Will it expand to StarCraft? Right now, this is just Warcraft. But what is your plan for sort of over time introducing new cards? How is that going to work?
We really want to make sure that we're continuing the game. The game's going to remain fresh. There'll be new ways to get access to different minions, different spells, different ways to keep playing. So there absolutely will be expansions. We're going to be looking at what are the types of cards that people really love to play with. And we want to keep on introducing new interesting mechanics and different ways to play. So you can expect to see more of that as we move into to next year.
Have you taken some of the traditional abilities in CCGs and broken them down by how complex they are to learn and say we're going to start them off with these basic abilities and then train our audience up to some more complex ideas? Or are you just looking at what people are playing with?
Even with the keywords that are in the game now, the mechanics that are there, we feel like they do have a lot of great potential for even the most hardcore.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say we necessarily held back on holding something that we think is going to be a really great gameplay mechanic for the sake of releasing it later. We just wanted to make the starting set, the expert set, feel as great as we could. We have some other ideas about what directions we could go in the future. But you could expect, again, similar levels of complexity as to what we have now. We feel like we're in a pretty good place with regard to managing the accessibility against the complexity.
Do you feel like Secrets are doing a good job of replacing that traditional interrupt style gameplay? It seems to be adopting the players seem to have adopted the concept very well.
Yeah, we're really happy with that. It was always a big challenge for us is how do we really get that chance for you to respond to something that your opponent's playing? And we really wanted to keep the flow of the game moving very quickly and not have a longer period of time where we have to wait for you to do something and then me take an action. And so Secrets do a really good job of keeping it moving without sort of compromising some of the different complexity and ways you can play the game.
Very cool, absolutely.
Anything on Twitter for you?
Yes, we're going to have a few more Twitter questions, see what people are coming in. Let's see. One, here's the Reddit is concerned about emotes. Can you ask if there will be more emotes in the future? A customizable wheel.
Customizable wheel is an interesting idea. We hadn't heard that one, but I definitely want to emphasize that we are looking at adding more emotes in the future. We've got some great feedback from the beta about other ones that people would like to see. Again, I'd encourage everybody to keep sending that feedback in through the forums, other places as well about, I really wish we had this other emote. But you can expect to see more of those coming up down the road.
Fantastic.
Well,
it's getting a little loud behind us.
It's getting a little loud in here, a little tough to hear on stage, so I apologize in advance if this is something you've already said. However, there was talk about building a feature into the game that will help new players advise them on their deck. So basically analyze their deck, maybe possibly make some suggestions. Is there anything you can share about that feature?
Yeah, actually in the beta today, we have a feature where I can click on a button and it gives me some recommendations of cards I can add to my deck. It'll actually look at my collection and give me some somewhat reasonable potential things I could add to my deck. There's areas where that could be improved. So, for example, as you're putting in a Murloc, it'd be great if we're kind of identifying the fact you have one Murloc there, give you some more Murlocs to supplement that and make it a stronger Murloc deck. And so there's ways we can expand that in the future. Nothing that we have quite ready to announce today, but I think we have some ideas where we could go.
Excellent.
Fantastic. All right, we got one more question for you. Another one from Zushiba, obviously a big fan of the game. Are we going to get more boards? I'm in the beta and loving it. I'd love to see many more boards like the one from the alpha.
Yep, you will definitely see more boards in the future. We have our art team has a ton of ideas of different sort of areas inside WoW that we could realize in Hearthstone. All kinds of cool ideas that can capture that same charming feel, give you some cool clickables in the corners. You'll see more of those coming, definitely.
That'll be good.
All right, well, we appreciate you swinging by. Thanks very much for hanging with us. We've got a lot more coming up here live on BlizzCon. We've got that Warcraft movie panel that'll be at the top of the hour with the first details on that massive Warcraft film coming for holiday 2015. Going to be a lot of breaking news there. But right now we're going to catch up on Warcraft, the world of Warcraft, and the story so far. How does the Mists of Pandaria, how does that transition to the next expansion pack? Well, we're about to find out with Dave from Blizzard. Check this out.
You are not worthy of your father's legacy. His punishment is not for you alone to decide. I won't let you take him.
So much has happened since the Mists of Pandaria expansion wrapped up. We had a civil war among the Horde, and as a result of that, they've chosen a new war chief.
From this day forward, Vol'jin, if you lead, I will follow.
And I think what we'll see is in this next expansion, the Alliance is really going to take the initiative in a way that they haven't taken the initiative in the past. So this will be a very exciting time for the Alliance.
If your Horde fails to uphold honor as Garrosh did, we will end you.
Okay, let's talk about Garrosh Hellscream, because he's had quite a journey from his humble origins in Nagrand. He was uplifted by Thrall to be the military commander in Northrend and ultimately war chief of the Horde. That didn't turn out so well. He turned out to be kind of a bad apple. His own pride started taking him down a dark path, and he really had a vision for the Horde that was very different than everybody else's vision for the Horde. In this next expansion, he's going to go back to the roots. He's going to go back to Draenor. He's going to go back to the war chiefs that he heard stories of as a kid, and he's going to unite them and form this new kind of Iron Horde that meets his vision. And, he's not going to be the war chief. He's going to be the sort of voice of wisdom, the prophet in the background, because he knows things that no other orc in this area can possibly know. It's going to be really scary stuff. As the expansion opens, there's an immediate threat. Garrosh has gone back into the past. He's opening a dark portal with the intention of getting vengeance on all the Alliance and Horde that wronged him in the current day. So the important thing is we got to go back. We got to stop him from opening the portal. And that's job number one. And you're going to find it's a lot tougher than we think. Players will find that this new expansion has a completely different feel from Pandaria because we're going back hard, just sort of the hardcore roots of World of Warcraft and the orcs versus humans that really sort of were the heart of the franchise. In the past, the Alliance has always defended against these sort of hordes coming through the Dark Portal. And now it's upended, right? The Alliance is going on the offensive. They're coming through the portal. They're trying to stop the orcs on their home turfs. For the Horde, this is going to be a really interesting journey because in a lot of ways, they're going back to the roots. This is Draenor is where the Horde kind of began. They still need to protect Azeroth. Azeroth is their homeworld now, but they'll be learning a lot about their own past. This is an absolutely savage world. It's not a place where you could take a breather. It will crush you if you are standing still. It's kind of classic Warcraft, but at the same time, something completely new. Really excited about it. I think players are going to just fall in love with this world. This is a very, very cool chapter in the World of Warcraft franchise.
That's World of Warcraft, the story so far, and we've got that Warcraft movie panel coming up in just a few minutes here at the top of the hour. In about 9 minutes, we'll be heading over to the main stage for some breaking news on that Warcraft movie that's been talked about for many years. But right now, Kat and I are joined by Johnny from the Diablo 3 team with a lot of buzz around the PlayStation 4 version of the game here. Obviously, Reaper of Souls announced in August. So I think this is the first time I can remember that Blizzard's got PC and console versions of a game playable on the show floor, so congratulations on that. I'm sure it wasn't easy to have two versions ready.
Not at all. It's a very big moment for us because a lot of people may forget, but we actually started off in console games way back in the day. Lost Vikings, Rock and Roll Racing, Blackthorn. So it's really exciting for us to be back in the console space and showing both versions of the game on the floor.
Yeah, I think it was a surprise to everyone that PS4 was going to be ready in time for BlizzCon. That was a surprise announcement to everyone. Josh was explaining before that the code base is stable enough that as you're building new things, it's easier to now. You've already have the first version of the console version set, so it's easier to build on it. But about how far along in delay in development do you see it being?
That's really
the longest question ever to ask a very simple point.
How far along are we in development?
About how far delayed do you expect it to be?
I guess it was really easy because we have a pretty brilliant tech director, Norbert Sabo.
Right.
We got the engine ported over fairly quickly. A lot of the features are kind of like sailing in right now. I don't want to get too cocky or too bold, but things are going really well. Let's just say that.
Gotcha.
Well, and also PS4, the architecture is so similar to a PC. I'm sure it's kind of easier now to probably co-develop across both the platforms than compared to like a PlayStation 3, which is the different architecture. So I'm excited to see kind of where you guys go with that as you wrap it up. I know a lot of fans online are excited. 1080p, 60 frames per second on PS4.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I hope people get a chance to check it out on the show floor. We also improved the rendering tech, so you can see a lot more detail in the textures. You'll even see like light reflections in watery surfaces. It's really cool.
Now, I know online some people have been asking me today about, I guess there's a rumor out there that remote play may not work on the PlayStation 4 version. Is that true, or is it still up in the air?
It's first I've heard of it. So,
the
totally.
idea that you'd be able to play remotely and things like that. Obviously, be able to play on Vita and things like that.
Oh, being able to play on Vita?
Yeah.
No, we have no plans for that at this time. Yeah, totally.
All right, fair enough.
There's also been a lot of people asking, is Reaper of Souls going to be on PlayStation 3 as well, or is it going to be exclusive to PS4?
Right now, we're focusing exclusively on the PS4. We're really excited about our partnership with Sony, and we want to make sure that the PS4 version is the best version it can possibly be. And nature fills a vacuum. It's such a powerful platform. We're kind of taking advantage of that. Once we have that all set, we're going to take a look at whether we can get it onto current gen. And at that point, so we're looking into it.
So what about supporting the current PS3 title that's out there with itemization patches and such?
Again, we're really focused on the PS4. Kind of like once we have everything set in place, then we will take a look at things like that.
Okay, so once Reaper of Souls is out for PS4, we wouldn't expect itemization updates for the current PS3. The game would be set as is.
Like I said, at Blizzard we really believe in supporting all of our platforms and all. So, like I said, right now, that's right in front of our face right now.
Right,
and kind of once that's out of our way, we can kind of look at the big picture and assess.
Fair enough. Lots of tough questions for you here. Next one comes from Andrew. He asked, will the PC version be updated to have similar options for control that the console has? Move with the ASDW keys and use abilities with the mouse. I guess some people like how it plays on console versus PC. Have you guys ever thought of kind of moving those controls back to the PC?
Like having a controller pad? Yeah, the thing is, it actually changes the game. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, plug it in, because we did a lot to actually customize it. It's a different UI. You have Evade. We brought the camera in much closer. So it would get really complicated really fast because you'd have two sets of rules for the same platform. So I think we're going to keep the game pads, the controller pad on the controller, and just keep the mouse and keyboard on the PC.
Why don't you walk us through what the new DualShock 4 controller does that's special for this game? Because we haven't had a chance to cover that on the stream yet.
Well, it has the touchpad, and we've capitalized on that. So right-clicking the touchpad will take you immediately to your skills, and left-clicking on it will take you immediately to your inventory.
So if Jeff and I are playing on the couch together and something drops, I can change my inventory on the pad rather than having to do it on the screen?
No. It's just it's a shortcut.
Okay.
Basically straight to inventory.
Gotcha.
And now, as far as four-player co-op, some people have said hey, it's really tough to manage your inventory skills.
Yes.
All I'm going to say is we feel your pain, and we're looking at steps to address it. I can't get into details right now, but yeah, we a lot of us like to play co-op at home, so it's first and foremost on our minds.
And just slow down the gameplay a little bit.
Yeah. Like I said.
Overall, though, how do you feel the response has been towards the itemization and the lack of auction house on the console version from your perspective?
Overwhelmingly positive. I've been asked why we didn't include the auction house on the console, but I've never been asked, can we include the auction house on the console? I think people prefer the game with no auction house. We want to get you out of the menus and into the game. And we talked a lot about Loot 2.0, how we're improving loot in Reaper of Souls. A lot of that was inspired by the changes we made on console. We actually call it Loot 1.5, the console version.
One of the things that is a concern specifically among the console community now is that obviously trading is much more difficult, because you're trying to get that customization, that custom build that you want. And Smart Loot definitely fixes that. But is there any solution in place to try to help find those customized pieces on the console?
We're talking about that, and like I said, we're very sensitive to that. I mean, in fact, the reason we built the auction house in the first place was to service that trading culture from Diablo 2.
Right.
And we know it's important. And I can't talk about it right now, but yeah, we are in discussions about that.
Perfect.
Lots of plans. All right, well, Johnny, it's been great having you by here. Congratulations on having both versions of the game here playable for the fans. So you get so there's some PS4 and some PC here, right? And I guess everyone gets to pick their preference.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. All right, well, thank you so much for coming by. Now, we've got a lot of great stuff still coming up here live on DirecTV on BlizzCon. Now, the Warcraft movie panel, we are just about 2 minutes away from that. A lot of excitement. It's going to be Rob Pardo, Chris Metzen, and the director of the film, Duncan Jones. They'll be on stage, and this is not just answering fan questions. They're actually going to be breaking news about this movie. And Kat, as you were hinting at earlier, we're going to finally find out where this is set in the Warcraft canon.
We are. We're finally going to hear what the story is, and I don't know if we'll hear any cast, but you're going to know what the movie is.
Know what the movie is, because it's going to start production early next year in Vancouver. So we're excited to see what they have to share about that, because they've been talking about it for many, many years. Originally, Sam Raimi was talking about directing it. Now it's Duncan Jones, a very talented filmmaker, and he's partnered with Legendary Pictures and Universal Pictures to create this film. And lots of casting rumors, certainly, on the internet, right, about people that may or may not be in it, right?
There has been. There's been the Vikings guy, which
Yes.
I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but it sounds confirmed.
Talking about him. There's talking about Colin Farrell at one point, I read, which I don't know what's happening. But
that seems to be more of a rumor than anything else, but definitely something they've been talking about a lot.
The question will be, does Chris Metzen get a cameo?
I hope. Currently, no.
Currently not planned?
But I think you should push for it.
All right, well, we will see what they have to share. You never know. It's the Warcraft movie panel live over in the main stage. And then this afternoon, we've got more panels. Of course, the StarCraft 2 World Championship Series will be playing out. We'll show you those grand finals live here on the stream. And finally, we've got the closing ceremony featuring a rocking performance by Blink-182, Mark, Tom, and Travis. They will all be live here at BlizzCon celebrating the 10th anniversary of their Untitled album. And of course, we'll show you that full concert uninterrupted right here on the virtual ticket. But now it's time for that breaking news about the Warcraft movie. You guys get to see it just like the fans do here live. It's all access as part of the virtual ticket, and it's so cool to have the filmmakers and Blizzard together here and share the news. First, not at Comic-Con, right here at BlizzCon with the real fans. Let's head on over now for the start of the Warcraft movie panel exclusively here on DirecTV's Virtual Ticket. Enjoy the show.